everybody, and welcome back to another video in our Android Starter course. So in this video, we're going to be looking at Jetpack Compose, and we're going to be looking at cards, and then also we're going to look at the columns and how we can arrange cards into a column to scroll through a list of items. So real quick, before we get started, come into build.gradle, and you can see here that my bill of materials for Jetpack Compose is 2023-0300, and that's the version that we're on. So if you're on a different version, this might be slightly different depending on what they've updated or anything else like that. But just for your reference, that's where I am. So now come back to your main activity, and basically I have an empty Compose project here, and I've deleted out the default greeting that comes with that. And we're gonna basically put some cards in here and show you how you can create a list of items and display them in a scrollable, manageable way. But before we start that, we're gonna need some data. And in order to do that, I'm just gonna make a data class down here. It's gonna be data class post, and this will be like a social media post or something like that. And we're gonna say val account is equal to, well, it's going to be a string actually, and that's going to be the account name, and then val content, and this is going to be the actual post content that we want to display. So now with that data class here, we can come up here and make a post. So val mock post is going to be equal to post, and we could say Jimmy 77. And let's just say Jimmy77, an amazing day today. Okay, so now that we have that data, let's go ahead and display that somewhere. To do that, I'm going to make a new composable function here. And you'll remember you mark all of your composable functions with this @composable annotation. And basically, this is going to be a composable is going to be anything that you end up actually drawing on your screen. So now that we have this generate card list, which is going to be our function, let's paste that up into our main activity up here, and also down into our default preview below. And once that's done, now the preview is going to populate, but there's nothing in there obviously because we don't have any code in our generate card list composable function yet. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make just a simple card. So I will just make a card here, and then in this card I'm going to hand it a modifier. We're going to say modifier is equal to a modifier dot fill max width, just so it goes all the way across the screen there. And once this preview generates, you'll see what that looks like. Again, it's empty because we did fill max width, but we didn't give it any height. So you could specify a height there, but instead of doing that, we'll actually just put some content in it. And maybe we'll do fill max width and add a tiny bit of padding to that. So dot padding, and we can just say maybe 6 data pixels on every side. So import data pixels, import padding, and then down here inside of this card. So here's our card in the preview. Let me just zoom way in here. You can see that if you zoom all the way in, you can see it's just basically a white block here, and it's got our 6 data pixel padding. That's the only reason it has any size at all. And this is going to be what we can use to display our fake post that we made. So down here inside of this card, let's go ahead and add a row. And then inside of this row, you'll remember we have the horizontal arrangement and then the vertical alignment for how we want things to be both arranged and aligned within the row. So for horizontal arrangement in the row, I'm going to say arrangement dot, we'll say space between, and then for the vertical alignment, I can say alignment dot, and we're just going to center it vertically right in the middle of that row. So you'll remember also there's a column, and the row goes horizontal, and then the column is arranged vertically. So the arrangement is for anything along the row or along the column. And because of that, you have horizontal arrangement in a row, but in a column, it's actually going to be backwards. You'll have vertical arrangement, and then you'll have horizontal alignment. So this arrangement and this alignment is going to actually be flipped between whether you're using a row or a column. And the arrangement always follows the direction of whatever layout it is. So if it's a row that's arranged horizontally, so your arrangement is going to be horizontal. But if it's a column that's arranged vertically, so the arrangement is going to be vertical. And then vice versa on the alignment. And then once we have all of that, I'm just going to add a modifier in here as well for this row and say modifier is equal to modifier.fillMaxWidth. Now inside of this row, let's go ahead and put a text field. So I can say text, and then inside of that text, we could say text equals mockpost dot, and then we'll just say the account name. And then you'll see that shows up on the preview, but that's going to be awfully small. So let's make that a little bit bigger so that we can read it. We'll say font size is equal to 40.sp. And again, you use SP for text and then DP for most everything else. And then after our font size, typically you want to adjust your line height as well. So we'll say line height equal, if our font size is going to be 40 SP, we'll say 44 SP for our line height. And then finally, you can see on our preview that is right up against the side there. So let's add just a little bit of padding to make that look a little bit better. We can say modifier is equal to modifier.padding. And then you could in here just put a single value. So if we said like 16 dp, this is going to put padding values on every side of it for 16 data pixels. But that's a little bit too much. We don't need it on every side of it. All I really need to do is space my text out at the beginning and the end. So actually really at the beginning, unless you have a really long account name, I'm just going to say start is equal to 16 data pixels. And that way we retain the padding on the beginning, but the top and then beneath it, we don't have to set all of those. So you can set them all together, or you have the option to set them all individually. And that's what we're going to do here. And then after that text, let's zoom out a little bit. There you've got Jimmy77. So that's fine, but let's go ahead and add an icon over here, because a lot of times on social media, right, you have your account name and then also their avatar or their picture or something like that. So for this little just compose demo, I'm going to add an icon in here. And an icon is essentially an image vector that you can use. So in here, we have to go ahead and assign an image vector for this. And we could create our own, or we could just steal one from the library that comes with Jetpack. And we can say icons dot default dot, and I'm just going to call this the account circle right now, which is going to give us this little generic circle that looks like we've yet to set our profile picture. Then we have to give this a content description. So I can say content description equals icon image. And then after that, let's go ahead and let that render actually. You can see we get this tiny little icon right there, and it's right up against the side, and it's too small. So I'm going to add a modifier to that. We could say modifier is equal to modifier, and then this is going to, we can change the size by saying dot size, and then we need to hand it a data pixel size, so maybe 80 data pixels for that one. And then after that, we need to hand it some padding just to get that away from the side of that. So I'm going to say, we'll put 8 data pixels of padding on that. And there we go. Now we have Jimmy77, and this is his icon right there. So the other thing that we're going to want to do is we've got the account name and a picture for that, but we don't have any actual post displayed. So to do that, we've got this one row inside of a card. I'm going to go ahead and just copy that, and under that row, make a second row inside of this same card. So now we have 2 rows inside of the card, So in this next row, all we're going to do is add a text um, for our post data, so the content, this guy right here. So I'm going to copy and paste that text that we already had, and we can say mock post dot content, and 40 might be a little big for that, so let's maybe say 32. And then because it's 32, maybe all we need here is 36 for our line height. And there we go. Now we have Jimmy77. I had a really amazing day today. And we've got the start at 16 data pixels. We've got, we can actually put some padding on the end as well. So we can say end is equal to 16 data pixels, and then let's do on the bottom as well equal to 16 data pixels. So we can set those all individually, and there we go. Okay, so now that we have that card laid out there, I actually want to display a whole bunch of these cards. So I only have one post down here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to cut that post, and we're going to say val mock posts is now going to be equal to a list of, and then inside of there, I'm going to put one post, and I'm going to say I have this list of posts with only one item. Can you add 9 more items? And now we're just going to come down here, stick a dot, 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 nice ellipsis, copy all of this, and then go on over to ChatGPT. And in ChatGPT, let's just go ahead and paste that prompt. And let's see, it should give us a list with 9 more items. Okay, there we go. We've got a new list there. Now I'm going to copy that and come back into here. Now instead of that single item, we have this big long list of items. So let's go ahead and instead of just printing that one, which we were doing before, we're going to want to print each one of those. So above the card, I'm going to make a column this time. And then let's hand a few parameters into that column. And while we do that, let's just actually go ahead and copy this card, or cut it rather, and put that inside of this column. So now we have that card in our column, and we want to go ahead and define some parameters for that column. So in here, I'm just going to add some vertical arrangement. So vertical arrangement, and you'll remember we have horizontal arrangement in the row, and then vertical arrangement in the column. And the column also has horizontal alignment, so those are flipped. And here we go, vertical arrangement is going to be equal to arrangement dot spaced by, and I can say maybe 8 data pixels. So that's going to be the distance in between each card item. And then finally, let's add just a tad bit of padding to that. So I can say modifier is equal to modifier dot padding. And I'm going to say maybe 8 data pixels for that. Okay, now we have our column and we have a single card inside of that column, but we don't want a single card, we want a whole bunch of cards. So I could say for post in mock posts, then we're going to go ahead and generate a card. So again, I'm going to cut all of this. And now we paste that inside of this for loop, which will loop through every post in our mock post list. And down here, instead of saying mock post now, our name is going to be post. And same thing down here, our name is going to be post. And there you can see now our preview looks a little bit better. We've got different items displayed on our screen. Let's just go ahead and pull up a phone here. Whoops, not that one. And let's have a look at how this looks on the phone itself. And it looks good, except you'll notice the last one is cut off, and I can't do anything if I click on this. So basically, we put them in a column, but a column is static unless you define the scrolling ability on it. So we're going to need to do that. So if you come up to the top of this column, And in the parameter list, actually on the modifier, we're going to add one more. So we've got our padding at 8 data pixels. And now if we add our vertical scroll, we could say, remember scroll state. And if I run that one more time, you could see now we can actually scroll through the items in our list. But if you look at the way top here, let me just zoom in on that so you can see it's actually disappearing a little bit earlier than we probably want it to. And that's because we have this 8 data pixels of padding all the way around. So let's go ahead and say start is equal to 8 data pixels, and then end is equal to 8 data pixels, and we won't put any padding on the top there. So now if I run that, now it disappears exactly where we want it to. So that looks a little bit better, but we're still gonna have a problem here. So with this list we won't, but presumably these are social media posts or some type of post that can keep coming. So our list with only 10 items right now, this is totally manageable, but our list can actually get a lot longer here. So if I come down here and say, we'll call this mock posts 1, and then after that we'll say val mock posts 2 is going to be equal to, and here I can just say from, I'm going to do a range, so from 0 until 1000, then we're going to say dot map, and inside of this function I can say post it, or we could say post, in quotes, I'll say user $, it plus 1, just so we don't have a user 0. And then after that, where you can go ahead and say this is post number, and all we have to do is say $it. Okay, so now that we have this list with 10 posts and then this list with 1,000 posts, I'm going to come down here again and say val mock posts is equal to mock post 1 plus mock post 2 and add those lists together. And the preview will look the same, obviously, because we can't even see all of those in our preview yet. But if I go ahead and run that on my phone now, you can see I'm clicking here and it moves, but it's a little bit laggy. And if I keep going, it gets laggier and laggier. And it's really hard to, it's not smooth at all. It's not good, and it's not a good experience. So we need to fix that. But before we fix that, I'll show you the reason for why it's doing that. Basically, when you do this column and you add the vertical scroll modifier with that, it's going to load every single item in your list every time you scroll. So every time I scroll, it's going to draw that entire thing. We don't want to do that because our list, if you'll remember, has 1,000 plus 10 items in it, which is a lot of items to redraw every time. So actually what we can do here is, instead of doing a column, we can do something called a lazy column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I can say lazy column, and we'll get rid of this vertical scroll. We're not going to want that anymore. We can leave the modifier, and then we don't need this. We're going to get rid of that space by now and go ahead and import lazy column. And that actually, just having that running over there was making my whole computer slower. So let's go ahead and import LazyColumn. And inside of LazyColumn, instead of doing this for posts in mock posts, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to say items. So we'll say items mock posts, and that's going to be all the items that we want to display inside the lazy column. So now that we have that, we're going to need to pass in our posts. And we can go ahead and import that extension function. Okay, so now we have our lazy column with the card and everything inside of it. So let's run that one more time and see how that looks on the phone instead. And hopefully that'll be a little bit smoother. There we go. Yeah, much, much better. Okay, so the reason why that's happening is, again, the column with the scrollable state is gonna load every single item, whereas the lazy column is actually only going to load the items that are going to be visible on your screen. So it has a lot less work to do behind the scenes. So a lazy column is definitely better and almost always preferable unless you're working with just a limited set of a small set of data. But if it's anything that could be growing over time or it could get to hundreds or thousands, definitely we want to use a lazy column for that instead. Now, there's a few more things that I'll show you here. So we covered the column and the lazy column and just a little bit about the card, but let's look at a few more options you have. So for this card, you can see it's just gray, gray and black, and that's kind of boring. We can change the colors around on that. So for the card, I could say colors is equal to card defaults. So you don't just add a color in here. What you do is you do card defaults dot card colors. And then inside here, I can go ahead and determine what color I want. So for the container, I could say container color and then container content and then disabled container color, disabled content color, depending on what this item is, if you want it disabled or active. There's all these different colors you can set inside of there. But for now, I'm just going to say container color equal to material theme dot color scheme dot primary container. And you can see that updates it to just a nice blue there. Now, another thing you can add after colors is you can add some elevation to this. So let me just zoom in here so that you can really see what this does. You can see this is just blue and it goes straight to white immediately. So to add elevation, you just add an elevation parameter, again, card defaults, and this is going to be card elevation. Now, inside of this elevation, we just have this default elevation parameter that we need to set. So if I set that to 6 data pixels and let that render, we should see a nice shadow appear now under this card. And there you go. You can see there's a nice little shadow around that card, making it appear like there's a little bit of actual elevation on this card. So that just makes that look a little bit better. Another thing that you can do is we have a card. We also have an outlined card. And basically that's just going to give us a card with an outline around it. There you go. Now you have an outline around that card and you have a shadow on that. Now this icon, we have our image vector, our description, and then our modifier, but that's just black. Let's say that we didn't really want black. Let's say that we wanted a different color. There's no color parameter here. If you type that in, you won't see anything, but there is a tint parameter. So I could say tint equals, and then here I could say color dot, and then whatever color you want. So that's what red looks like. That doesn't actually look that great. But because we use the on container color here, or we use the primary container color really for this tint, we shouldn't be using color red. We should probably be using on primary container. So to do that, we can say material theme dot color scheme dot on primary container. And really, if we want to be consistent, we probably want to use that color for all the text fields as well. And then down here, we'll do that down here as well. Color is equal to material color scheme on primary container. Now let's run that app just one more time. And there you go. Now you can see this looks just a little bit better. Now, one more thing I'll mention in this video is if you look here, you can see in the default preview, it's kind of blue, but on our phone, on our actual emulated device, it's more of like a purple color. So in Android, in the settings, you can actually choose a color scheme that you want, or you can base it off of your wallpaper colors. So for example, if I come, you can see here, my wallpaper is kind of, it's got like a black with some dark blue and then some white, and like it's got that kind of color scheme going on. But if I switch here to my other phone, and I've got this more yellow and bright color scheme with some browns and some green in there. And if I were to run that app again on this phone, you can see now I've got a brown bar, and these are like an off orange color. So all of these colors are adjusting based on the user settings. And if you're wondering where that is, it's down here in settings, wallpaper and style, and it pulls these color schemes actually from your desktop. Or if you don't like that, you can, they have a bunch of predefined ones that you can use just for basic color templates. But the point is, the reason that we're using the material theme color scheme instead of coming in here and saying, oh, we want that to be dark blue and we want this one to be light blue, and defining the actual color in there, is when the user's colors are changing, we want everything to look good together. And if their color schemes are changing, we want everything in our app to change to match that new color scheme. So that's why we're always using the material theme color scheme instead of just saying, like, for example, color dot red. You could do that, but that's going to look really bad with different color schemes when it's changing back and forth. So hopefully you've learned a decent amount from this video, and hopefully you found it helpful. We talked about the card. We talked about the icon here. We talked about the column, the scrollable column versus a lazy column. And definitely, if you benefited from this, go ahead and subscribe to our channel so that you won't miss any future content coming out, and leave a comment below telling us what you think.